The NFL draft is just around the corner. You know what that means, guys. Dynasty player values, some are going to go up, some are going to go down. We've got a huge show today. We've got Jeremy from FTN Fantasy. Let's get to it.
Go district, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
What is up, Fantasyland? We're back in the district, back-to-back nights. Last night we did a 125 buy-in on the FFPC. Dan, myself, Andrew crushed best ball. Played for 25K, Dan, last night. How fun was that, buddy?
Yeah, absolutely, and especially fun having Bip and Vince on there as well. So we had two teams that were drafting live on the same podcast, so it was a lot of fun.
So somebody tweeted today how much they love our show and how much they love that show, but how giving suggestions on how to talk about the players we're selecting from. All you hear the whole show is, I like 1, I like 2, I like 5, I like 7, I like 8. You know, so he's like, maybe we would find another way. But that was a challenge. Hopefully, you guys got a lot out of it, guys. Go check it out if you haven't. Theo, we've got another big dynasty show tonight. We've got the NFL draft just around the corner. You're actually heading down there with the Player Profiler crew, which is awesome. So, I mean, you know what that means, man. We're in Dynasty, the ripple effect, right? What's the ripple effect? That's what we're going to talk about tonight. We've got a huge guest. Why don't you walk him in proper and let's get this thing started.
Yeah, so I'm excited that we have Jeremy Popielarz in from FTN. This is actually our 4th FTN guest this year. We had Vlad Selder. We had Scott Spratt, Nelson Sousa, a friend of ours and a co-manager of mine. And now we have Jeremy. I really enjoyed Jeremy's written content. I also enjoy what he's putting out there on Twitter. And I reached out to him. I said, Jeremy, let's chop it up for some Dynasty. And then I sent him the longest show sheet I could ever put together. So, Jeremy, how are you doing tonight?
I've seen longer sheets, so if that makes you feel better. But
it's long enough. Well, it's long enough.
We're a week away from the draft here. I'm overly excited. If you follow me on Twitter, you would know that I enjoy rookies. I enjoy the prospect profiling. I enjoy the entire process of the draft. And I'm excited because it's always fun to kind of talk about like what we're going to talk about now, you know, and just kind of that worrisome of some fantasy managers heading into the draft, depending on players you already roster, and that potential that you might end up with a bust over, or you could end up with the bag and have the boom and that guy that's going to look like he has a huge potential to be a good asset this year. So
two sides to every coin. I'll tell you 2 horror stories. One is Dan Williamson sitting on his couch 2 years ago in Minnesota thinking about a couple of James Robinson shares that he has still. Dan sold off a few of them, made some. I know Dan cashed in on a few of those James Robinson shares, but sitting back and relaxing, and then Jacksonville says the name Travis Etienne. And then a little less horrific, but JD was practically a Michael Carter stan about a year ago, and Michael Carter was heading to the dead zone until a young guy named Breece Hall was selected on day 2. So it happens every single year. I think that this is when we talk about the dynasty rookie drafts and we talk about the draft itself. We've been doing this for months, Dan, months, JD, where we've talked to guests about the rookies they like. Where do you have this guy? Where do you rank Bijan Robinson in context and dynasty rankings overall? All kinds of stuff like that. But today we're going to look at some of the veterans I'm really stoked to have Jeremy here for it. Jeremy, before we get started, tell everybody about the written work you're putting out and also the podcast you're putting out.
Yeah, so I mean, I have a weekly Dynasty stock article over at FTN Fantasy. It's kind of whatever fits the mold that week. I decided to talk about. Just talked about a couple under the radar running backs for this year's draft. I also kind of cover some of that news. I'm gonna have more, obviously, once the season starts to turn in for them. I can write for redraft as well. To me, when I play Dynasty, every year is still a redraft league, so I'll have that stuff over there. I also have all my Dynasty rankings. I have a Superflex big board over there as well, which is the top 50 rookies that I have this year for Superflex. And then I also have, like you had mentioned, Theo, the FTN Dynasty podcast. Me and my co-host Adam Pfeiffer have been chopping that up, pretty much breaking down 30 to 40-minute episodes of more of the bigger named type of kind of prospects coming out. We got the running backs and or quarterbacks and tight ends to finish up this week. Going to be cutting it close, but we'll get them in there.
So just before we get started into these veterans, what is your general take on this running back class? Are you excited about this class? Just your general takeaways, Jeremy.
Yeah, I think the class is probably, I think it's deeper than the past couple seasons. I wouldn't say it's probably going to produce a ton of high-end fantasy assets. I think you might end up seeing a lot of running back 2, running back 3 type of players, which is kind of not the worst thing. But I think it's a little bit less exciting than what we had hoped for. I think some of these guys coming into the season, we had bigger hopes and dreams for. They kind of flared out / flamed out there in college in their final season, or didn't really live up to what we hoped for. And they even at that, didn't put up the best pro day numbers and or combine numbers. I'm going to single out a guy I love in Zach Evans, kind of tanked his way down the boards. But I think it's a class that's pretty deep. I think draft capital is going to kind of beat out everybody outside of Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs. I think Charbonnet is close to being in that category as well. But after that, I think draft capital kind of beats them out, kind of helps us navigate how and we should be valuing these guys, and potentially going to affect who we're going to talk about with the veterans as far as what we think their potential could be. So I think it's a good class, but I don't think it's like, well, use, for example, like 2020. I think 2020's class was a little better. You're getting JT, CEH, DeAndre Swift, Antonio Gibson. Like, I think that class might have been a little bit better than I think what we'll get this year, when we were thinking this year might have been a little bit better than a year like that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm excited, a little bit more excited than you are, I think, about this running back class. I think that, obviously we have the extreme quality at the top. And then I think that a lot of those guys maybe that we're projecting to be on the RB2, RB3 line, and all it takes is a few things to go their way. And you're talking about high-end RB2 production, maybe some RB1 years. So I think it could be kind of a perfect storm in terms of it could be a transformative year, because I think a lot of these guys are going to get drafted in the second, third, and fourth round, and you have a lot of aging running backs at the same time. So I'm pretty excited. Dan, what's your overall take with this running back class?
Yeah, I'm real interested to see what the NFL thinks of it, and exactly how many round 2 and round 3 guys we get out of this. I think Jeremy kind of alluded to that, but I think that's going to tell us a lot about this class. And as we know, most NFL teams are no longer going with a bell cow anyway. So, if you're looking at this class going, player X, player Y, whatever is gonna be a bell cow for me. I mean, it's Bijan, and that's pretty much it. The rest of them are probably committee backs, at least to start. Maybe 1 or 2 of them can end up working themselves into a bell cow role, and a year or 2 down the road. But I don't see it happening this year for sure.
JD?
Yeah, for me, I'm like you, Theo. I'm excited about this draft just because I like drafting running backs. For me, there's a lot more at the running back position that I want to be drafting versus, let's say, the receiver position. When I look down the board, there's at least 8 guys that I want on my depth, especially the way I build my dynasty teams. I want deep running back benches. These guys you guys know how you manage the running back position different than other positions. So if you go top heavy at the receiver position, you love this draft. If you like, these running backs, to add depth to your running back. Like you said, Dan, probably limited with how many workhorse running backs. There's one, maybe two, probably four we'll get out of this. Maybe there's some magic that happens, a couple lucky landing spots, opportunities, injuries, that kind of thing. But I'm a little more excited about the running back position than, say, the receiver position in this year's draft.
And then, Jeremy, I just wanted to follow up with you. I'm bullish on Jahmyr Gibbs.
Mm-hmm.
We've had some, but he's a slightly polarizing. 199, sort of. We don't necessarily need him to land in a perfect spot, but we'd like him to land with a pocket passer. Is he the sort of player that you're going to devalue or increase his value based on landing spot, or do you just believe in the talent?
And what do you think he is? Like, what do you think his upside is?
So when we did our podcast, I had mentioned Jahmyr Gibbs. There has been a lot of talk of like people wanting to comp him to Alvin Kamara. And although he has good contact balance, he's not Alvin Kamara.
He's 15 pounds lighter.
I think he's a little bit more of the Aaron Jones
There's a
mold.
big difference at that position.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit more Aaron Jones's mold. He's a little bit better, I think, overall athlete. When the numbers break down, and he's probably a little bit better route runner than Aaron Jones is. But I think if you're looking for a ceiling, it's like Aaron Jones. You know, like he gave us a really good season, a good couple seasons there in Green Bay in a good system. And I think that's what we're hoping for with Jahmyr Gibbs. I do think that he's a pretty good runner in between the tackles. I think overall that the talent is a little bit better for a guy, though, that's 5'9", 199. I mean, you could hope for Austin Eckler as well. You know what I mean? He's kind of in that area, in that range of potential like ceilings. I mean, obviously his floor is kind of like, I don't know, we could say, you know, like a Kenneth Gainwell or something to that effect ultimately. But I do think he's a little bit better of a runner than that stereotypical like under 200 pound kind of pass catching style back. But there's a spot I really like. I sent out a tweet earlier today of like, if the running backs get drafted these spots, how would it go? Like, I really think I have my eye on Cincinnati at like 28. Yeah. That would be like Jahmyr Gibbs is like solidified it too. The only player I think that could really pass Gibbs would be like Charbonnet, and it would have to be like the perfect landing spot. And I don't even know necessarily where that is right now. But like,
is that with your Bills, or is that where is that?
Nah. I think James Cook would be too much.
Cincinnati, I think, is good nuts for a lot of these guys right now.
I actually had Charbonnet at Arizona in that tweet. I really like that spot.
One too.
Do you know what I mean? James Conner, year one, maybe not so much for Charbonnet, just because Conner's still going to be sticking around. But I do think that once Conner would move on, Charbonnet's proven he can be a pass catcher and a kind of handle that every down workload. So I would think Arizona's a really nice spot just because they have that clear need for what could be a full 3-down type workload, which we don't get often anymore. So Arizona would make it really tough. I would think he would move closer to Gibbs. But if Gibbs lands in Cincinnati and say Charbonnet's in Arizona, it's still Gibbs for me, just because I think that Cincinnati spot's a really nice spot, depending on everything that falls out with Joe Mixon and stuff like that. So he's pretty solidified it too for me. I mean, it would take, like I said, everything to fall right, and like it would almost be like Gibbs falls to like a weird landing spot where he's battling like another, like say like Gibbs lands with like Dallas, you know, where he's basically Tony Pollard again, like, so you're like battling that same role, and Charbonnet ends up in like Cincinnati, like then I would probably bump Charbonnet over Gibbs. But I think Gibbs is still a little bit better than Charbonnet as far as the tiers go. So I think it's kind of Bijan, Gibbs, Charbonnet. They're close, but like not.
And why don't you round out your top 5 running backs, Jeremy, and then we'll get Dan's top 5 running backs.
Yeah, so it's Bijan, obviously, Gibbs, Charbonnet. Then I actually have Tank Bigsby. And then 5 is kind of a tie. I'm going to go with Zach Evans, though. I know the NFL doesn't love Zach Evans. Not a lot of people do, but that's kind of where I'm at. Just those 5 right now.
Dan?
Yeah, I got Bijan number 1. Gibbs is a very reluctant number 2. I'd love to see Charbonnet pass him up, but that's going to probably take, you know, as Jeremy said, the right landing spot, and also be reasonably close in draft capital. Izzy Abakanda is number 4 for me, and Roshan is number 5.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm on the same top 3 as you, Jeremy. It's Roshan, I think, is going to land in the second round. and I think that he's got the profile where I think I'm going to push him up to 4. 5 becomes difficult. I really like Abanikanda. I really like Devin A. Chain. I think your Tank Bigsby call is interesting. I know Cody Carpenter's also on him at Player Profiler. He's kind of got a little bit of the Dameon Pierce to him, where he's an SEC back with size that people just kind of forget about, and he might end up in the early 4th. So I think 5 for me is kind of up in the air at this point. But if everything lands correctly, it's got to be Abanikanda, Dan. I think with that athleticism and explosiveness, 20 years old, it's probably him. But I think that there's some guys behind that I'm really excited about. That's why this class is difficult to rank. I think it'll be easier to rank after we know the landing spots, obviously. JD, your early top 5.
Yeah, similar first 3. Roshan, I recently moved up just because it sounds like like you said, Theo, he's gonna go earlier. I would say, but between him and Abanikanda, I would say whoever gets the better landing spot or has the better draft capital. The other name I'll throw in there, I love the Tank call. I've got him at 6 right now. Wait, 2, 4, 6. I've got him at 7 right now. The other guy I have in there is Kendra Miller, that I really like. 5'11", 215, big play burst guy, 3 down size. He can catch the ball, doesn't need a big hole, and kind of reminds me a bit of Lev Bell, just the way he plays behind the line there.
So let's dive into it, guys. Every single, this year, we had a pretty big turnover in the free agents, and now we think there's going to be a lot of running backs drafted. We brought up do they go in the 3rd and 4th round? Do they go in the 2nd and 3rd round? At this point, we don't know, but we know that there's going to be a lot of them selected. Let's talk about some of these running backs and our confidence level in them for Dynasty. I think the first name might surprise some people, but we all sort of have some trepidations about Travis Etienne. We'll start out with Jeremy. Travis Etienne, your thoughts on him as a Dynasty asset and the sort of back that Jacksonville could add that could make you nervous as an Etienne manager?
So yeah, with Travis Etienne, I think that there's some not necessarily full-on confidence from the Jaguars at this moment. Travis Etienne obviously was kind of coming off an injury last season. He kind of had some really good moments in there. He also had some bad moments at times, but they kind of proved and showed to us that they kind of want to supplement him somewhatly, whether it was James Robinson early in the year, Snoop Connor got some touches, JaMychal Hasty rolled through there. So I do think that the Jaguars are going to bring somebody in. And I think, honestly, it's going to be the guys like you kind of mentioned there. You guys were talking about Roshan Johnson, I think, is a really good option potentially there. It's going to be one of those big kind of bruiser backs, whether that's Roshan, Dwayne McBride, JD, like you said, Kendra Miller, one of those bigger guys that can kind of handle maybe the early down work. And Travis Etienne kind of becomes a 3rd down, maybe sees some first down work at times. I just think that Travis Etienne is going to be kind of a 50-50 style, maybe 60-40 split as far as the backfield touches go for Doug Peterson and the Jaguars. Additionally, you see they brought in Calvin Ridley, who's going to be there. Obviously, we don't know exactly how good Calvin Ridley is going to be, but now you've got Ridley, Kirk, Zay Jones, who kind of broke out. You've got Evan Ingram back there. You've got an offense with Trevor Lawrence that's looking to throw the ball and be explosive. Now, that doesn't mean that that's terribly bad news for Etienne, but Etienne didn't see a lot of red zone touches. And so for me, if they bring in a guy that's like Roshan or one of those bigger bodied guys, Snoop Connor is definitely going to lose his job probably to one of those guys. Yeah. And it's going to lose a lot for Etienne's ceiling. I don't think Etienne's a bad dynasty asset. I'm not saying trade away Travis Etienne, but I would say trade away Travis Etienne if somebody thinks he's a top 10 back and they're going to pay that. I just don't think that he's a top 10 dynasty asset. I just think that they're going to try and replace him. He's going to kind of fall into that 3rd down-ish role, but like a little bit better.
It's a lack of targets that concerns me. They bring in Ridley, and Trevor Lawrence is taking a step forward. He's got very good wide receivers, and he's got a very good tight end, and they have showed that they don't target Travis Etienne. Doug Peterson's even joked around about bringing in all these running backs. I mean, he wants to do it. Dan, your thoughts on Etienne, and Dan, maybe give us, if you're an FFPC manager, a potential picks trade you would take for Etienne right now.
All right, so yeah, ETN. I think number one, you got to keep in mind that Doug Peterson has traditionally been more of a committee back coach. He prefers to have a committee. With ETN, I am kind of keeping an open mind on the targets. Sometimes coaches don't like to put everything on a player's plate in the first year, and last year was really kind of his first year. I mean, he had a year of meetings and whatnot while he was on IR, but then this is the first year that he's actually been playing this past year. So I think it's possible that ETN could see a bump up in targets and he could become the guy that we thought he was. But if they add anybody with any significant draft capital, especially in a 2-down banger role, that's going to probably cut down on how many touchdowns he can score, and cut him back to definitely more of an RB2, worst case scenario RB3 type scenario. And as far as picks, I mean, in this draft, I think I'd probably 105, something like that, might be what I'd be looking at for ETN.
I think you can get more than that, though, Dan. Like, I think if that speaks volumes to like Dan, I think you could probably get more. So like Dan's putting him at the 105 for evaluation. That should just tell you all you need to know about Travis Etienne in terms of where he is on like the true totem pole of elite dynasty assets. JD, your thoughts on Etienne? Are you bullish on him right now? Are you bearish?
Yeah, I mean, if you're just looking at last year's stats, and you guys mentioned it, it's hard to. But let's remember, he's coming off a Liz Frank. He injured it in the preseason 2021, missed the whole season. So it's his first season back. It was the first season with this offense or this team with a coach and some success and learning an offense that he's actually going to stay in for more than a season. When you're talking about Lawrence, so you got to like everything about this offense. The targets do worry me, Theo. When you look at his stats, he was averaging about 3, and he's about the tight end 22, I believe, when it comes to targets. But if you look at his snap shares earlier in the season, he's got more like of those 40-50% snap shares, where more in the back end, you see a lot more of, the 80-70%, even 90% snap shares. So you see him a lot more involved. Dwayne McFarland talks about the 20 plus touches, which you want from your top running back. And, as long as he can get a bit more targets, he was getting that last year. So with regards to the 20 plus. So I think that as we see this offense evolve, we're going to see Etienne's role evolve, like Dan said, going into really his second season when you think about it.
This one, people love talking about. It's kind of a litmus test. Jeremy, where are you at on Tony Pollard? Gets franchise tagged, RB8 overall last year. Zeke is out of the way, but he gets the tag. So we don't have long-term knowledge about his contract situation. And does Dallas spend an early pick on a running back, whether it's day 1 or day 2?
I'm not overly worried even if they spend that. We saw Zeke was their pride and joy, and they were giving him a lot of touches for a while. Obviously, Pollard kind of overtook him partway through the season last year. So for me with Tony Pollard, I'm a little bit more in on Tony Pollard. I like the offense a little bit better. I think that he has likely a more important role than Travis Etienne, and an offense that's maybe a little bit more keen on using that running back in kind of his role to supplement the pass game. So for me, I think that I would probably put Pollard and Etienne kind of in that same category, even though Pollard doesn't have that security in a contract. I think no matter what, even if he leaves Dallas, most roles and most teams in the NFL would use Pollard in a very similar way that Dallas does. So him leaving wouldn't really worry me, just because he did it on such limited touches to begin with. So for me, I think that I'm a little bit more in on Pollard than Etienne, even though there isn't a long-term contract in place.
And I think you could make that pivot, Jeremy. I think you could pivot from Etienne to the Tony Pollard manager and get Pollard plus for Etienne.
Yeah,
in a lot
I
of leagues
definitely.
right now.
Especially before the draft.
100%. Dan, your thoughts on Pollard?
Yeah, I pretty much see it the same as Jeremy. I think he's he's not going to be in any worse of a role than he was last year. So his valuation really hasn't gone up as much as you might think. Everybody seems to be kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. So I'm fine with him right where he's at. I'd be a buyer if somebody's offering him to me at value right now. So That's kind of where I'm at.
And what would be a pick for Tony Pollard, Dan, since you're a buyer? What would be a pick you'd be willing to give up to get Tony Pollard? I'll just put it out there. I have a 105 Pollard manager sniffing around my 105 non-super flex. How much more would I need with Pollard, or do you think that's about a decent pivot?
Trading away Pollard for the 105? I would
Trading away the 105 for Pollard.
I would trade away the 105 for Pollard. Absolutely. I put him at about the 103.
Okay.
Yeah,
And Jeremy, what about you? Jeremy, you'd be about that?
Yeah, and one quarterback, I would at 1.5, I'd be like, give me Tony Pollard all day. Just because one quarterback, there's a significant drop off. I mean, you're talking
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Bijan, Gibbs, if he's in your taste zone, and then maybe JSN. Like, I mean, after that, you're swinging for hopes and dreams. And I mean, there's a lot of guys I like, but you're really swinging. I mean, Tony Pollard's proven. So anywhere, even like you said, I mean, 1.3, 1.5, anywhere in there, I'd be gladly taking Tony Pollard for that pick.
I like the ETN Pollard pivot idea, even though I came up with it myself. I think it's a good idea. JD, your thoughts on our boy Tony Pollard?
Yeah, the biggest difference, I feel it's easier to be more confident in Pollard just because he's shown us, like, he gave us a 37-point week last year. Like, he gave us some top 6 weeks. You know what I mean? Like some week winning production, even with Zach there in that offense. So you got to think now with Zeke gone. I think I said Zach. Zeke gone. The thing that worries me with both of these running backs that we're talking about is the depth behind them, right? That's when there's no depth behind them. You look at a guy like Aaron Jones. The reason I like taking Aaron Jones in the 3rd right now in best balls is because the guy, I know what to expect. I know that AJ Dillon's there, and I know how that offense works. And if anything, now with Rodgers gone, you'd think that they're going to rely more on the run game. Whereas with these teams that have one guy, even though we think that could be the guy, you got to think they're going to add another piece. Yes, there's only 2, 3, maybe 4 that we think is coming out of this draft class, but like we're talking about these guys for a reason, right, Theo? There's risk, I think, in any of these guys that we talk about tonight at this time of year.
I think Jeremy made a good point. Like, Gibbs to Dallas would be the one that would really hurt Pollard because you'd lose potentially the receiving aspect. But I think Dallas adding a thumper like a Roschon with that late 2nd round pick wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing at all for Pollard because it keeps him fresh. He's not going to be he's never going to be a Derrick Henry. He's a different kind of back. And I think being attached to a thumper is a good thing for him.
I think Dallas might not go super early. I know there's talks they want like Bijan, but if you're really into looking for like a thumper type of role, like the later portion of this draft, like rounds 5, 6, 7, there's a good group of like bigger size thumper, 1st, 2nd down type of runners that you're not going to have to pay a ton of draft capital for and get, a pretty good production for them to come in and spell Pollard. You could talk about like Evan Hall, Lou Nichols, Ibrahim, Chris Rodriguez. Like, I mean, you could start naming names left and right for some bigger guys that could kind of fill that role. So I wouldn't be surprised if like Dallas waits a little bit and like you see a day 3 guy go there who could have decent value. But I think it's going to keep Pollard a little bit higher as far as our hopes for him go.
Another factor, Theo, I want to just add that we didn't really talk about is let's remember that McCarthy's going to be running this offense this year. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm old, Dan, and I've been playing this game for a long time. I remember him being kind of annoying for running backs in Green Bay. Was that not the fact when he was running the offense?
At times a little bit. I mean, the main thing is they brought on Schottenheimer for the OC, and it's just going to be a slow offense. Almost certainly slower than it was last year, and that's gonna cut down on the number of attempts total, most likely, unless they play really, really good ball control.
From our boy Jared Smola, in games Tony Pollard has topped a 50% snap rate. It's 11 games. He's averaged 19.2 PPR points per game. So we're really hoping that it's just no Bijan, and I think everybody will be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
One player who I'm high on was a 3rd round selection last year. We were getting him in our non-super flex rookie draft somewhere around the 201, Rashad White. He survived free agency. Leonard Fournette gone, and they only bring in Chase Edmonds. The offense is going to take a step down for sure, but people are still getting a little bit excited about Rachaad White. Jeremy, how nervous are you about Rachaad White seeing increased competition through the draft?
I think 100% he's gonna. I think the Bucs are definitely bringing somebody in. I think they like Rachaad White. Rachaad White gives them an aspect to their backfield they want, which is kind of the receiving style. Maybe come in here, there, and get some carries. But I don't think they're ready to give Rachaad White that whole workload. And I think they're going to go pretty early. I think they're a candidate to see somebody in the second or third round. And I think a guy that I'd really like to see there is like Roschon, a little bit of that thumper that can maybe still play some passing work. The worry with Roschon is that he is such a good pass blocker that could hurt Rachaad White more than others, just because they might want him on there on third downs to be that pass blocker as well. So I think you're hoping that it isn't Rashawn Johnson, but I would like him in Tampa. But I think they bring somebody like that again, kind of how we talked with Tony Pollard, one of those kind of thumper early 1-2 down guys, and let White play the third down type of role.
And I think if Bijan's there at 19 and they don't have to move up for him, I think they're taking Bijan. I think there's a lot of juke there in Tampa. I personally think he'll be gone before then. But I think that would be like the nightmare scenario. Dan, Rachaad White.
Yeah.
It would be horrible. It would just be horrible. Dan, I'll throw out a trade, Dan. Rachaad White or Aaron Jones. You take the younger back or an older aging back, because that trade's out there in some of these FFPC leagues.
Right now, I'm going to take Aaron Jones if I'm a contender. Just got to. But, again, that could change after the draft. If Tampa really doesn't do much at running back, they draft a day 3 guy who's more of a thumper. I could maybe get behind Rachaad White, but again, I think if I'm a contender, I'd rather just have the sure thing and Aaron Jones.
I also think Rachaad White, Dan, do you think he's the kind of guy you would trade away, or you try to use him as part of a package to move up or to get a better asset?
Yeah, I think probably use him as part of a package is where you're going to get the best value for him. It's hard for me to say. I have 0 Rachaad White in Dynasty. Sorry. I'm the opposite of Theo.
I've got White in the triflex that I keep telling you guys, where I've got the 105, 106, and the 109, and I've tried to pair him up with the 109. I've tried to upgrade from him. The thing you got to like from White is getting 58 targets as a rookie in last year, but that's with Brady. You're worried about the offense in Tampa, but because he can catch the ball and he's getting targeted, that kind of balances it out, because you got to think that offense is going to have to throw. They don't have a big arm, back there at quarterback. So a lot of those targets should go to White. You got to think that they're going to bring in a guy that's going to complement him, maybe replace the maybe more of that Zeke Fournette, old man goal line kind of guy. But the worry is the offense, right? With guys like White and Theo, these 3 guys we talked about, as though they're in similar or different situations, but similar types of backs, right? So you want either a guy to come complement them as opposed to replace them and then move them as an RB2 versus, keep the role that they have now.
Rachaad White is like a better version of Michael Carter last year at this time. Where we're really trying to paint ourselves a picture. He's running back 25 in redraft right now. So he's right on the cusp of RB2.
I think if you can move him and upgrade, that's what I'm trying to do. And it's not easy, but if you can make that happen, I think it's a good time to do it, because we really don't know what we have in White and in that offense and what ends up there.
I traded White in the 107 for a 102. That was a trade I really liked. I did that in FFPC league, a pretty high dollar one. And Dan, I have trimmed some, but I just feel like I want to have some exposure to him. He's not the kind of guy I want to cash out of everything. Now we're starting to get to a tier of guys that are a little sketchier. I think that one offense, to say the least, it's going to get a little skanky with some of the names we talk about next. So this is a player who might be JD's favorite player in the NFL right now, Khalil Herbert. So they bring in Deonta Foreman to Chicago. Everyone is expecting including myself, is expecting a big step forward from the Chicago offense in year 2 with Eberflus. They have to at least improve. They can't be as bad as they were last year. Your thoughts on Khalil Herbert, Jeremy? How you value him? Do you value him? And I'll just throw out a couple of picks here, guys. Chicago has the 53rd overall pick and the 61st overall pick. Danger zone right there for Khalil Herbert.
Yeah, so I think Khalil Herbert's definitely going to not be replaced, but he's definitely going to be supplemented. They already tried. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say tried. They did. We don't know what Deontay Foreman's going to be, but Deontay Foreman's been pretty good the last 2 seasons since kind of returning off of the injury, the Achilles injury. So, like, Foreman is not a easy guy to put away in this backfield. I think that Herbert and Foreman alone are kind of a split. I think that the Bears want to go with what they did with David Montgomery and Herbert last season. Maybe Herbert sees a little bit more close, like maybe it's more 50-50 and a less like what Herbert had last season. But I do think that they're going to supplement him. And if they even go anywhere with a running back, there's real potential that Foreman probably loses the job before Herbert. But I don't think it's going to be like Herbert's backfield. And if you're going to can find somebody in your league that values him as like the guy, I think you should be definitely cashing out. I enjoy Khalil Herbert. I just think that there is no way that the Bears don't leave this draft with at least getting somebody at some point in this draft. And your hopes is that it is kind of like maybe that thumper role kind of to replace David Montgomery or Foreman. And you hope they don't go with like a all-purpose guy with like a Banacanda or, like a Evan Hall or somebody that can play all 3 downs. Then Herbert's really in trouble. At least if they go with like a McBride or a, Rodriguez or something that's like a thumper, then at least Herbert feels a little safer. But there's a good chance that they take somebody that really kills Herbert and Foreman altogether.
It's the danger zone. And Foreman also, I think, beats up Herbert a little bit. Like, I got laughed at for saying this by some, there's like Herbert stands. We have JD, who's one of them. But you have like the Khalil Herbert people out there. And Dan, I don't know, what would you pivot off of Herbert to, or do you disagree with this and think Herbert might be a buy?
No, I'd definitely be willing to pivot off of Herbert. What I'd pivot to, I don't know. I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I don't
207 or Khalil Herbert.
What's that?
207 or Khalil Herbert.
I'm probably gonna take Herbert over the 207.
Yeah. Okay.
Just because he's shown he can play in the NFL.
203.
203 is probably a lot closer. I'd say 201, 203, somewhere in there. Just because Herbert's shown he can play. I think the main thing probably in Herbert's favor right now is that they did sign Donta Foreman, and that kind of takes the pressure off him at running back a little bit. I think that way they go into the draft and they don't feel like they have to do something early at running back or anything like that. I think I agree with Jeremy. I think they're going to address it, but it may not be somebody who's an immediate threat to Herbert. So I still definitely hold out hope for Herbert to have a decent role this year.
Defend your boy, JD.
The only thing I need to defend is Khalil, the real deal, Herbert. I mean, it's just fun to say. But, guys, let's be honest, okay? If you have a dynasty team, you don't have Khalil Herbert as one of your top 2 running backs right now. If you do, you're making a mistake. If somebody's willing to pay that, you sell him. He's an RB4 comfortably on your dynasty team, could be an RB3. I love, like Dan said, that they brought in Foreman, not as much as a threat. Foreman's awesome, but let's face it, he's not going to be he's not necessarily going to take over that backfield. It all depends what happens in the draft. What worries me is you got to think that Chicago, with the moves that they've made and the commitment that they've made to Fields, that they're going to want to give him every possible opportunity, every possible weapon. And as much as Khalil gave us RB1 last year in Houston with 2 touchdowns, 169 yards, and 31 points as the RB1, he's more of a guy that you're not necessarily depending on week to week. So to me, that's how you manage him, depending on where he is on your roster in Dynasty. If you can get value for him, right now is the time. In some of these best ball drafts, I do see him going a little earlier than I'm comfortable with, and for that reason, I don't have a lot of shares.
One player who's interesting, James Conner, because I think we've reached a point where we all realize that he's older and he doesn't have a whole lot of dynasty value. They have the lowest over-under win-wise in the entire NFL right now is Arizona. Jeremy, I'll repivot this question. Is James Conner the kind of guy that you want to kick the can at to try to get cheap, to get maybe some, RB production, or is it take whatever you can get? Arizona's going to draft a running back in that, second, third, fourth round and really give him problems.
I think it depends where I am as far as like a dynasty team goes. If I realized and I'm at this point where I'm not really contending or I'm like a mid-level team, I could look to see to dump Conner. But I could tell you right now, I bet on most dynasty streets out there, nobody's paying for James Conner.
No one is.
So you're getting pennies on the dollar at this point. So it's probably better just to hold him and hope that even if they do draft an early running back, they give him the veteran treatment where he gets that first crack at it and he sees a majority of the touches for at least half the season, gives you, 5-6 good weeks. Then you put him on the bench and see potentially if there's an injury later down the season from the rookie or something like that, you could see him resurface. Or maybe you can dump him mid-season to a team once they see that, oh, hey, Connor's still holding out. And I don't know what the role is going to be. I think they're going to be pretty run heavy. I think you could see both Conner and whoever they bring in be useful, especially because I don't expect Murray to be ready week 1. I expect Murray to be like half the season, if that, coming off of that ACL injury. So I think you're going to be seeing, I don't know, who's their backup at this point? Colt McCoy, right? Still? I think it's still McCoy.
It's they actually just signed Jeff Driscoll.
Yeah, they got McCoy, they got Driscoll, they got Blow.
Driscoll and Blow, yeah. McSorley signed elsewhere, and McCoy's hurt. It's horrible. It's going to be
either way. Either way, they aren't running the football, so they're going to be running pretty heavily. And I'm not afraid of Kootenai Ingram behind James Conner as like another guy. So I think that I'd hold on to him just because his value is not there for Conner. But I do think he gets replaced in this draft.
You can kick the cans with a third. Some James Conner manager might take that one. Dan, you didn't make the bull case with James Conner, please.
Yeah, let's end the slander now, please. Come on, James Conner's definitely a buy. You know what you're getting when you're buying him. You're not spending a lot to get him. What you're looking for is that Conner owner who's just kind of got the fatigue. They're just trying to get rid of him. As Jeremy was saying, kind of your team is mid-level and you want to move off of him and get what you can. That's the kind of owner you're looking for to buy Conner from. But I really think Arizona has a ton of holes. I don't see them putting running back as a huge priority right now. If they're smart, they won't. Again, expecting NFL teams to do smart things all the time isn't necessarily the best way to go about it. But if they are smart, they're not going to spend a ton on running back this year in the draft or in free agency or anything else. Connor's proven to be a really good running back. He can catch, he can run, he can do it all. And if you look at what happened when Kyler Murray was out at the end of last year, Conner was stringing together running back 1 weeks, just week after week after week. If I can get that kind of production for cheap in my dynasty lineup, I'm definitely doing it. So I've been buying Conner pretty much everywhere this spring.
Dan, we had a whole show about it.
Absolutely.
Give us the trade you did, Dan, because I thought that was a fun one, the Montgomery and Conner trade.
Oh, yeah.
Or ballpark it if you don't have the details.
Yeah. Hit JD. I'm gonna pull that one up.
JD, your thoughts on James Conner?
Yeah, James Conner's the classic. Like if you're a contender, he's worth more on your bench or on your team than he is in a trade because he's played 13 plus games 4 seasons, and 3 out of those 4 seasons he's been a top 10 running back points per game. So if you're contending, he's a no-brainer. You want him on your team. Dan and I did a whole show about it, guys. Go check it out. The Owners Lounge. We did a show on a trade that we specifically made with, I believe, James Conner, and the other one was Harris, Najee Harris.
Yeah, Najee Harris.
I believe he's in that episode. So we talk about a pretty big high-stakes leagues that we're in with a bunch of Sharks. Dan and I co-own some teams, so we talk about that. But James Conner, if you can buy him as a contender, what are you going to pay at most? Like a mid second? I'll pay that. You say a third, but I'll pay a second for a James Conner.
I think you can get him. I think you'll get him for a 210.
Yeah, and then if you go into the season with him because you think you're going to do well, and then your team for whatever reason doesn't do well, and he's producing, he's a piece you can sell to one of those contending teams halfway through the season or more towards the back end of the season, and you can make up whatever value that you're not able to get now at that point.
Tyler Algier was a fantastic story last year for Atlanta. Helped people win fantasy leagues down the stretch. He was.
I think Dan, did you get your trade?
I did.
And maybe we can do a quick plug to our buddies after that.
Yeah, sure. We'll finish Tyler Algier. Tyler Algier goes over 1,000 yards, finishes the year well. It's danger zone time. Jeremy, your thoughts on Tyler Algier? How long does he survive the draft? Does he at least make it to? Does he make it through day 1 and day 2, or is he going to get dusted in the first round with Bijan?
You led into that. I think you follow me on Twitter.
That's the spot. They're the donkey franchise that would spend a top 10 pick on a running back. They want to run a guy into the ground. It's the easiest layup there is.
I've been saying it since like January. I've been like, there's just something that's telling me in the back of my head that Arthur Smith's going to be like, you know what? I want Bijan Robinson at 8. Let's do it. So outside of maybe a quarterback falling to them, I think Bijan's at 8, and I think unfortunately Tyler Algier is going to be dusted. I kind of said it last year when Tyler Algier landed there. I liked Tyler Algier, but I felt like he was kind of a 1-year rental, as well as like a cheap 3rd round 1-year rental that could be potentially really good in 2023 or 2022. And he was good. And then be easily replaced this coming year just from this class. Obviously, if they make it past Bijan, I'm less worried because of just how Atlanta and Arthur Smith run their backfield. We saw it, him, Patterson, they have Olsen rolled through there. They had a ton of guys that were producing some points here and there. So if he makes it past day 1 and Bijan isn't the guy that's there, I would feel better. But I do really think that Bijan's going to be the guy that they take at 8. So I'm saying he's getting busted.
Cody Carpenter now is projecting him to go there to Atlanta in this latest mock. But yeah, I've moved, like I didn't have the stomach for it. I had Tyler Algier helped me on a number of teams last year. I moved every share I had. He was the classic kind of guy that you package with other assets to make the trade look good. I packaged him maybe 3 times in FFPC leagues, and I'm glad that I don't have to sit there worrying on draft night. Dan, pour one out for Tyler Algier, or make a bull case.
No, I'll pour one out. I think if he makes it to day 3 and they still haven't drafted a running back, then he's probably okay. But I feel pretty strongly if they don't get Bijan, they're probably going to do something on day 2. So I'd be moving him. Yeah.
JD, anything to add about Algier?
Yeah, no. I mean, if you can move him now, that's the play. Either way, I mean, how much more is his value going to go up? Even if
Algier was drafted in the 5th, right?
5th round pick. Yep.
NFL 5th. That's an easy running back to try to move off of anytime that you've gotten whatever you spent on him in a rookie pick back. Which
was the same with Herbert, right? With a 6th rounder.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, basically you got production out of him last year. You got utility out of him, and you can move him for probably as much as you spent, maybe more. Why not just go ahead and do that? JD and I did the same thing kind of with Isaiah Pacheco. Yep.
Guys, go check that out. That's another Owner's Lounge. Great episode.
Shout out to the Owner's Lounge, and shout out to your Pacheco trade was a nice trade. I saw that one. Brian Robinson, guys, 3rd round pick, Ron Rivera favorite. We have a new offensive coordinator in town in Eric Bieniemy. This is another team, Jeremy, that Las Vegas considers to be one of the teams in the mix for Bijan. Do you have any confidence in Brian Robinson right now?
Oh, I think Robinson just got shot in the leg again. No.
Not really. I didn't love Brian Robinson to begin with. I feel like he's kind of an early down, get you what's there type of running back. My real hope is I think that Antonio Gibson's the guy you want out of this backfield. I don't think they take Bijan Robinson. I just don't see it. I think that they kind of roll with Robinson and maybe Gibson, and I'm hoping that the enemy brings what they saw with J.D. McKissick and KC at the end of the season, and Gibson kind of starts to see a lot of the touches. Not necessarily touches, but like just plays out of the backfield, and if you're playing in PPR, which most are, that's going to be great. I mean, Robinson may see the red zone work because he's a little bit more sure-handed, doesn't have the fumble issues that Gibson's had, but I was never in on him. I don't think he's in danger as far as the draft goes. I think he's just in danger for the pure fact that Gibson's still there.
Yeah, I'm with you. Gibson has been a guy I've been trying to kick the tires on to try to get more of. I'm hoping Bieniemy can really unlock him. Dan, any hope for Brian Robinson at all?
Yeah, we have to hope that the new owners of the Redskins realize that Rivera is a farce and get rid of him, because he's about the only thing propping up Robinson's value.
It's going to be Eric Bieniemy by like game 6. They'll start out the year poorly.
Absolutely.
The writing is on the wall.
Basically, they hired a head coach in waiting right there, just in case the new owner wants to make a move.
The Commanders.
And then they gave him Sam Howell too. They're like, yeah, here.
I think Bieniemy is gonna love having a guy like Gibby, and Dan and I think we have him on a lot of teams. I know I've got him on a lot of dynasty teams. I've been drafting him in these drafts over Robinson, not ahead of him necessarily, because I think Robinson actually goes a bit ahead. But you said everything I was going to say, Jeremy. I love that. I love Gibby in this offense, and I love Bieniemy in there, maybe mixing things up.
Yeah, and apologies. Yes, it is the Commanders. I'm old. It's after 8 o'clock. I'm sundowning.
What did you call them?
I think I called them the Redskins.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
The Javonte Williams, guys. This has been Javonte Williams was worth more when he went right down with an injury, and it's been a continual slow drip of losing value in Dynasty. Is Javonte Williams so beat up that he's a Dynasty buy, or is this a player you should try to rid your Dynasty rosters of based on the loss of value and the new coaching staff and all the other factors? Jeremy, how do you view Javonte Williams right now?
So I don't think 2023 is going to be his year. I don't think we see a lot of Javonte in 2023. With that being said, I do think that in 2024 we could see a bounce back. I like him still. I think he should still be a buy into this dip. But just know what you're getting into. You're not getting a guy for 2023. You're getting a guy for 2024. But I like him. I think he's not necessarily Alvin Kamara, but he has showed a lot of good traits as far as a pass catching back out of the backfield. He showed obviously the ability to break tackles, bounce off tacklers, just be an absolute animal out there. So for me, I think that Peyton's going to like that. I do think that Denver brings somebody in this draft. I will say that. They kind of already supplemented it with Samaje Perine. And I think that's more of just a kind of a one-year rental style. So I think Denver could wait. Either that, or they might bring in somebody that's kind of like a Devin A-Chain, a Tyler or Tajay Spears, somebody in that type of role. But I still really like Javonte. He was young to begin with when he came into the league. He's going to have just 1 year of kind of recovery, and then 2024 he should be back and going. Is he going to have a lead role? No, but Dan touched on it earlier. Most of the NFL nowadays is kind of a running back by committee, so I'm fine with that. And I think that now is probably a decent time to buy him, but I was kind of going to wait till after the draft. If they draft somebody, I think Javonte is going to just continue to kind of plummet, and I'm going to try and take advantage of it then.
We moved him down in our rankings on Player Profiler, but he's still like RB18-ish. He is. We talked about the Sonic Truth Pod about how he's a great target for productive struggle teams who can just sit on him for an entire year. His situation is slightly like when ETN had the big injury. You saw how low he went in startups because people knew they wouldn't have him for a year. I think you treat Javonte Williams like that. Treat him like he's not going to play at all this year. If I'm a big-time contending roster, I will consider flipping Javonte Williams because I want to have live bodies that I can use this year. But if I'm not that, I think that he's reached a point that you can go and get him. Dan?
when he got injured last year, I got off immediately. I pivoted over to CMC, and that was the time to move. Was right after the injury. If you had him at this point, I'm not touching Javonte with a 10-foot pole. I don't really have any rosters that are like in the total rebuild stage where I'd really even consider rostering him at this point. So I'm just not touching him. I'm definitely not touching him in any sort of redraft situation, best ball, any of that. And in Dynasty, I just I there are just other bets I would rather make than a guy who's just completely wrecked his knee.
JD, your thoughts on Javonte? Are there any rosters that you have right now that you would want to support Javonte Williams, especially FFPC, where you have the roster restrictions?
No, I think the time to sell Javonte was when we were drafting best balls like earlier in the season, February-ish, when Javonte was going in the earlier rounds. Now he's been falling. So to me, the best ball is always a nice gauge for dynasty values. That's I use that for my trades. And you're seeing him drop, and it's all about that recency bias, right? We haven't seen him do all the things that he did in 2021 that got us so excited. This guy was almost a top 12 in a lot of the stats that Jeremy talked about, and catch rate, juke rate. So when he's healthy, he's good. But to me, the time to sell him is past. So I'd probably hold him unless I could package him and, maneuver something good. Otherwise, you wait till, you guys know as well as I do, you're going to see like an Instagram or something about him on a treadmill. That's when you sell him if you have him and you don't want to hold him. Otherwise, like you guys said, he's a perfect, if you're flopping next year, your team's not good enough to contend. He's a perfect guy to go get. Between now and I think we're already close to the bottom. He might go down a bit more as we forget about him and maybe they draft a guy like Jeremy says, but I think you can go out and buy him now and feel good about it.
I moved him in the 109 for a 103 in a league, and I moved him with Muth to get Hawkinson in a tight end premium, which I like that one.
I like that a lot, dude. That's what I mean by pairing it up and up. That's beautiful. Sorry, Dan, I didn't mean to cut you off. I got excited about that one.
No, I thank you, Dan. Thank you, JD. I appreciate that. And then I wanted to talk about one running back who might get traded during the NFL draft. I think there's a number of rumors here about Dalvin Cook possibly being moved. Jeremy, is there a landing spot where he could actually gain value, or is it pretty much all downhill from the cushy confines of Minnesota?
I would say, yeah. I mean, I think there's plenty of spots out there. I'm going to say my Bills as well. Why not let him play with his brother? You know what I'm saying?
That would be great.
I think just getting to maybe it's tough. I mean, Minnesota scored a decent amount of points last year, so it's hard to say a more explosive offense. But yeah, landing in a spot like, maybe Buffalo, maybe Cincinnati chooses to reach out and kind of get more of that veteran type of role back there if something happens with Joe Mixon, or maybe they decide to go a different route. Or I know there's a lot of talk with Miami. Like Miami to me would be a downgrade. I don't love him in Miami. I just don't think they preface it, the Miami, I don't think they preface it, the running back, enough that he would be uber fantasy relevant. Do you know what I'm saying? I would think that for me, they're a little bit too pass heavy. And as far as their running backs go, they'd still use probably Wilson and still use Mostert. So Cook to Miami, I don't love it. I don't think it would help him. I think him staying in Minnesota would be better that way. But yeah, it really, I think there's not many, but there's a couple. Like I said, I think the Bills could be a lateral move. I think Cincinnati could be interesting. Arizona, I guess, maybe playing with Connor or something. I mean, maybe. But again, I don't know a team that's really contending that would really – I mean, Philadelphia, that could be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that trade happens.
I haven't heard that.
I feel like they're going to go somewhere with a running back, whether that's bring somebody in or draft one. I know they brought Penny in, but, we all know how Rashad Penny goes. So maybe that would be interesting. It just came to my head. So I'm thinking they're late in the first. Maybe they'll trade that and get Dalvin Cook and say, hey, let's actually go win the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, I think it's hard because I think a lot of the places he might end up, it would be even a slight committee, and you don't know how he's going to correlate there. Minnesota is just such a prime landing spot for running back. I think we'll be really excited if Minnesota drafts a running back. I think that's an easy spot to get excited about. Dan, that's your team. Maybe your thoughts on Dalvin Cook and what direction Minnesota is going to go in.
Yeah, I think Minnesota would like to get rid of that salary. I think they like Cook as a player, but the salary is pretty untenable. So I do think they are going to look to move him. The thing is you got to try to find the intersection of a team that's really can use him and also has the cap space. Like Miami is really tight on cap space right now, and as Jeremy said, I'm not sure it's the best fit anyway. So I wouldn't want to see him there. Buffalo, I think, is great. They've got 6.1 million in cap space. They could free up some more money, I'm sure, make him fit. The Bengals could definitely make him fit. They've got currently 17.5 million in cap space. A couple that weren't mentioned yet, the Rams, 10.1 million in cap space. I mean, we know they love nothing better than buying older players and spending money. So why not? They just got rid of Allen Robinson, so they got that money's burning a hole in their pockets. And then what would be really interesting would be the Chiefs. They've only got 4.8 million in room, so it would be a tough fit. But man, oh man, imagine Dalvin and the Chiefs. That would be something.
Break fantasy Twitter if that happens there over the overdraft weekend. JD, your thoughts on Dalvin Cook? Any spots you'd be excited about, or is it all kind of a downgrade?
No, you guys touched on it. I mean, maybe it's just him, right? Like you got to look at 2022. He had very similar numbers to 2021. He played 4 more games. About 250 rush attempts, 1,100-ish rush yards, 4.4 and 4.7 yards per carry, and then 30-ish receptions. So very similar stats, more touchdowns last year. And the RB14, RB9 prior to that, he gave us those 2 back-to-back RB2 seasons. So maybe a guy like Dalvin could use a bit of a scenery change in order to shake things up and get him back on track as a top running back. But I think it's all about expectations now when you're drafting him, when you're trading for him. What's your expectation? What is he going to produce for your fantasy team next year? Are you a contender? Obviously, you're not going to go get Dalvin. But if you're holding him and you're not a contender, I wouldn't trade him now. I would wait to see, when the hype is there, when he lands somewhere nice, or he re-signs with Minnesota. That's when I try to sell Dalvin if I'm holding him now, and I don't think I want to hold him.
So we hit an hour. So I want to get one more running back in for Jeremy to discuss. Saquon Barkley had a massive rebound last season. He returned value for dynasty managers, redraft managers. In fact, the shout out to Pat Kerrane shipped the $2 million on Underdog with a Saquon Barkley Austin Eckler team. How are we treating him as a dynasty asset right now? He got franchised by New York, but it's not going to be a long-term contract. Is Saquon a guy that you are comfortable with for like a 3-year window?
Yeah, so when I play Dynasty, I try to keep it that 2 to 3 year window. I mean, we're all here really to win. Like, I don't like giving away money, so I try to win. So I don't want to like just build a super young team that's going to take 5-6 years to really benefit from. So for me, I'm still in on Saquon. I think the questions really come like, does he play? I know there's rumors that he didn't want to go to or didn't attend their optional mini camp or whatever they had this spring. So I don't think that there's necessarily a downgrade. I think he went to the best place. So for me, I think that being in New York was best for Saquon. I don't want him anywhere else because there is little competition. Even if they add somebody, I doubt they're going to go super early because they have so many needs elsewhere on a team that got the best out of their players and made the playoffs. Why not go and fill out the rest of your team with the picks you got? You've already got a really good running back, if not great running back in the backfield. And I think he's just going to see a ton of volume. I don't think they can address every single need they need at wide receiver in this draft. So he's still going to see heavy usage in the passing game. It's still Daniel Jones back there. So for me, I really like him in New York. And I know that there's some uncertainty around long term, but I'm still getting at least a year. And then from there, we can kind of go and argue what we do with him next year. But if he turns in another good this year, I can guarantee you he's going to be worth more next year in the offseason, no matter where he goes. So for me, I'm kind of into holding on to Saquon / acquiring him if somebody's not asking an astronomical amount for him.
Yeah, I think I'm on the Saquon as a buy as well. And I agree with you that he showed so much last year, and we have a lot of confidence in that Giants offense getting better this year with Brian Dable year 2. I think that Saquon, even if he's not a giant in 2 years, he's still young enough that I think he's going to sign a nice contract with somebody else. Dan, are you on that train with Saquon?
Yeah, I'm definitely in on Saquon. Obviously, if you're not a contender this year or next year, your best move is probably going to be to sell him and get peak value right now. But if you're contending at all, he's a great piece to have.
I'm going to disagree, guys. I'm all about the 2 to 3 years in dynasty at the running back position. I'm going year by year. And if you don't want the guy that's going in one of the top 2 rounds right now in best balls in redraft on your dynasty team, if you're contending, you don't know how to play fantasy. You need to either change games or watch more GOAT District, because these are the guys that help you win leagues, So if you're contending, you're moving guys like Barkley, JT, Eckler. Yeah, they're getting old, but you don't play running back. You don't invest in a running back to come carry your team for 10 years, 5 years. You should play running back year to year. Your running back is like redraft. That's how I play it anyways. Obviously, you've got the values that are attached to their dynasty values, and it's based on more long-term. But if you play properly and you've got the proper builds and you're honest with yourself about where your team is, if you're contending, man, you want all the Barkley this year, all the Eckler, all the JTs, especially if you can get them at a discount because of their age. Let's not forget, guys, we lost 2 seasons with Barkley, right? We saw that with Dalvin, and Dalvin made up those 2 years.
And I've done some stuff like just looking back at past top 12 finishes and stuff like that. And like in PPR leagues and stuff, most running backs, like the running back position, the top 12 doesn't really yearly, at least like the yearly totals, there isn't as much turnover as you would really think. Like there's like 8 guys that kind of stick around, at least in the past couple seasons. And then there's really only 4 spots for new players to kind of break in. And Saquon's been one of those guys. Obviously, he had the injuries where he was out of, but you're getting those Saquons, the CMC, the Eckler, the Aaron Jones. Like those guys stick around as far as season-long scoring goes. And like you said, JD, like obviously it's yearly probably with running backs is probably a better way to look at it. Because ultimately we never know. Look at Tyler Algier, look at these guys that are going to potentially be replaced. Tony Pollard had a big year. Could see him get replaced. Travis Etienne, like the guys we talked about all episode, like there's nothing that says they aren't going to get replaced, at least supplemented to an effect that they're no longer that top 10 asset we thought they were going to be for the next 2-3 years.
Theo, let me do a quick plug, and then you can decide if we invite Jeremy back to redo the second part of your Red Bull backed show sheet. Or why don't you give us your thoughts before we do the plug?
No, it's this was awesome tonight. I underestimated how much I could put on the show sheet, but I think we hit the most important position, and I'm really excited that we had Jeremy on tonight.
I forgot to record in 3 times 3. That's what I forgot. We weren't going fast enough.
Oh yeah, that's it.
And Jeremy, why don't you tell everybody, just remind everybody once again where they can find your stuff?
Yeah, any written and work or rankings and stuff like that is over at ftnfantasy.com. Additionally, you can find me on Twitter at PopesFFH. I post pretty much mostly stuff on there. Rookie thread, stuff like that is kind of what I'm rolling through now. And then, like I said, the FTN Dynasty podcast is over on mostly all platforms. You can check that out. We're going pretty heavy on episodes now. We'll probably slow down once after the draft and kind of get some of these landing spots and stuff like that. We'll probably slow down and do a couple episodes a week. So.
And Jeremy, do you guys have any early discounts so they can read your good work over there at FTN?
Yeah, it's yearly all the time. You can use Pope, POPE is 20% off the subscription. I don't know if we have anything else going on. Early might work for 25% off the Platinum package. That's going to get you access to pretty much everything and anything FTN Fantasy. That's stats, my articles, Jeff Radcliffe, Scott Spratt, all the guys over at FTN. And that also gets you Jeff Radcliffe's rookie guide. So that's a plus too, but it's only on the Platinum package. So that's depending on how much you want to spend.
Jeremy, I've been meaning to ask you all show. So before we cut this, do you have any concerns with all this Josh Allen's gibberish that he talked about in an interview, or how he's got to start running less and that kind of stuff? Do you have any concerns with Josh Allen's value right now in Dynasty?
No, they do that every year. It's always
go by
every offseason. Every offseason is just like Sean McDermott and Brandon Bean. Yeah, Josh Allen's got to run less than the first week of the game's like 30 rushing attempts.
Yeah.
So
It's easier to keep your job when you're
Yeah.
having the best quarterback in football, besides Mahomes, do his
yeah,
thing.
and I could see his rushing go down a little bit, but it's going to be more in like the middle of the field. They're still going to use him in the red zone. So
100%.
I'm not too worried.
Who do you want them to bring in, Jeremy, from the draft?
I want to see Josh Downs or Jordan Addison or JSN if he falls. I want a slot guy. They need one. I like Gabe Davis and all, but he kind of wasn't what we hoped for, I think. And he's kind of a field stretcher, what I expected him to be. But they really need a guy in the slot. I mean, when you're trying to bring Cole Beasley back after, being retired for 8 weeks of the season, there's definitely a need there. And I really like Josh Downs, Zay Flowers, any of those guys, those quick release type of guys, I think will be a real benefit to Josh. That's where we saw some of the best of his when Beasley was more towards his prime than what we have seen in the last couple of seasons. So get some pressure off Diggs and open up that offense a little.
Real quick, are you concerned about Diggs at all being a malcontent, shall we say?
I don't think so. I think it's just it's a lot of frustration. It's another team that's kind of been there. They've been close. They've been closer. And then it just kind of seems like everything. And then this year was one of those years. It just kind of fell off the rails, like that last game with Cincinnati. Cincinnati came in and just smacked the teeth off of them. Like I was watching that game and like, I love the Bills and I know they can come back, but like, once Cincinnati scored that second touchdown and the way that offense was looking and everything, it was just kind of like, oh boy, we're in for a long day. So I think it was just pure frustration of like how they lost that game and everything. And I think Diggs will be fine. I think you see him come back. I think the Bills kind of start out pretty good again, add some help in there with the receiver room and kind of just open it up. I mean, teams were able to like quadruple cover Diggs, and at what point, and Josh getting to the point where he's not just going to throw into quadruple coverage, he's going to try and spread it around. So I think we see a little bit better. I think Dorsey, his first year, kind of struggled a little bit. So hopefully that as general, the whole offense hopefully gets a little bit better and a little bit more efficient and kind of gets past that. I felt like last year there was a little bit too much of, hey, Josh, go make a play, or let's throw a 50-yard bomb. Like they didn't have that underneath game, and that's really where I want to see, whether that's James Cook or that's one of these rookies like we'd mentioned, Josh Downs, Flowers, something like that, to kind of help them get that 5 to 10-yard offense back that they were so good at in the years past that they kind of abandoned last season. So
I like it. There's your Bills Mafia take right there. That's beautiful, man. Like I mean, I'm in Toronto, so I love watching the Bills, man. You grew up watching them, so as much as I'm a Colts fan, I always cheer for the Bills.
Yeah, they're an easy team to cheer for,
Yeah,
I feel like,
especially when Diggs is one of my favorite players, so it's kind of hard to not like him. Dan, you and I are coming off a couple big drafts. We talked about it earlier. We did one of the last never too early FFPC for 25K, 125 buy-in best ball tourney last night. Go check that out, guys. Dan and I did a underdog super flex recently. Go check that out on the show. For sure, make sure you're following Jeremy if you're not already at Popes FFH. Theo, what do we have coming up? What do you have coming up? I think you're doing 32 hours a day of potting and streaming.
I would appreciate if you guys, we talked about some of the rookie running backs. We had Dwayne McFarland on First Class Fantasy yesterday with Billy Muzio and I. And then we had Jared Smola on today on First Class Fantasy. And then we dropped our Sonic Truth podcast mock draft special. We did a super flex tight end premium mock draft. We had a bunch of people. Scott Connor was on there. We had Jax Falcone on there. Our boy Memphis Young was on there. Cody Carpenter was on there with Matt and Alan and myself. So we're putting out a lot of stuff. And then, I'm heading to KC next week. And the GOAT District will be on the Player Profiler YouTube channel next Wednesday night, first of many Wednesdays, with Matt Hicks, where you guys are going to be talking up a lot of these prospects, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, totally looking forward to it.
Guys, check us out on Player Profiler Network.
We'll tweet everything out. It'll be all ready to find, but that's going to be 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock every single Wednesday night. The Good District's going to be bringing on great guests. There's going to be the 4 of us, the 3 of us, and we're going to be getting after it, putting out amazing content, and it's going to be a really, really fun summer in the district. And then look for JD and Dan with the Owners Lounge. Look for your ball-in shows. You're basically going to be having to check out JD's links because Goat District's going to be in a lot of places.
Guys, winning fantasy football content. We're here to help you guys win, whether it's best ball, dynasty, redraft. You're going to crush your leagues if you follow us all off season. You see guys like Jeremy come on our show on the regular. This show is brought to you by the FFPC. Guys, that's where we play. That's our fantasy land playground. Right now, you could play for $1 million, $6 million in prize pool. The early bird promo, you get a free $35 credit if you register by June 1st and draft by the 15th of June. That's with 3 entries, guys. It's a great tournament. I believe it's $350 the buy-in. You've got dynasty startups starting from $100. You've got best ball tournament, guys. $35 buy-ins for 50 Genos. $50,000 super flex best ball tournament at myffpc.com. You've got the main event for $1 million grand prize. Theo, Dan, and Andrew and myself are going to be in Vegas drafting our main event entry, one of them. And then, of course, you've got the Dynasty Orphans. Check it out, myffpc.com, guys. There's a link below. Use the code GOAT if you're first time on the site. The chat was rocking tonight. We love all you guys. Harry Snowman, 1912, all you guys, you know who you are. We appreciate you guys joining us tonight. We'll check you all later.
Goat District, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text. That trash offer's the best. You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the and I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
We gotta get back for part 2, Jeremy. That Theo's got a whole. He's got a whole was it back in the day?
We got to go part 2 with Jeremy just to get through the entire show sheet. We didn't hit even the dynasty pivots, but
this is like the Britannica Encyclopedia Britannica edition of the show sheet, Dan. Showing my age on that one. No, that was fun, guys. That was a really fun show.